Hello, everyone. Welcome to FAA Safety Briefing Live. I'm Paul Prydecker, and once again, I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Susan Parson. Hello, Susan.
Hi, Paul.
We don't always get a chance to do this in the same place, but sometimes things align to where this works out for us. So welcome to Wisconsin, and we're anxious to deliver another program on the magazine for the July and August issue. Remind our viewers and our audience, what do you do at the FAA? I know you're always here to help, but what else?
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, I'm the editor-in-chief of FAA Safety Briefing magazine, but I also write for the director of the Flight Standards Service and various other people who need things written. And I like to say I'm the chief border collie for the aviation airman certification standards project, the ACS. So those things kind of keep me busy.
I'm sure they do. So let's move on. We have a great issue coming up for you. And as always, we have a little bit of housekeeping to do. This is an opportunity for viewers and participants to earn their wings and AMT credit for this program. We have a slide up which gives directions on where to click and where to access the various programs to get the credit. However, as we've often said, it's sometimes necessary to actually read the print copy. And how do they go about doing that?
Well, if you look on the next slide, there's a direct link to the print copy, and we verified it. It's the new issue is there. It's available. It's online for you to click and read. We try to make the content of the quiz that you take for wings credit, which is very simple, but we try to make sure that we cover most of that material during this broadcast. However, part of the purpose of doing this is to give you enough of a taste of the content of the magazine that we hope you'll be eager to go and read the articles, especially with this one and this theme.
Well, and with the time frame that we have, we can't
Absolutely.
quite cover everything in the depth that we have, but it's a wonderful magazine to review. It's got a little bit of something for everybody in it.
We try.
So the magazine has a more or less standard format of topics that we like to cover. And what are some of the main topics and the main missions?
Oh, we do. We want to be the safety policy voice for non-commercial general aviation, and you see on the screen what our goals are: raise awareness, explain safety, and this is one that I think is near and dear to your heart as well as to mine, to encourage continued training, because pilots, we can never know enough, we can never know too much, and anything that we can do to encourage people to, our fellow pilots and ourselves for that matter, to keep learning and keep trying and keep training is a good thing.
Well, in fact, I'm going through that right now, where I feel like I'm in continued training. My background is I've been an instructor pilot at a regional airline for almost 20 years, and I've just decided to make a change and go back to becoming a normal pilot. A normal pilot, whatever that means. So a normal pilot where I'm doing revenue flights and operating in the system. And I feel like I'm in training mode right now, because our operation is either taking me to airports I've never been to before or certainly don't remember. And my flying days are in and out of Chicago. So there are so many things to learn. And I feel like that what I'm going through right now, I think, is the same for every pilot, in that every flight is an opportunity to learn, and there's lessons to learn from doing things right, and there's lessons to learn from our mistakes. And that actually gets into what this issue is about the safety culture and what a safety culture is. And the timing of this, of course, is geared around Oshkosh. The July-August issue will, of course, be all over the FAA safety building and around Oshkosh. And with everything that Oshkosh brings to it, there are many, many opportunities to discuss safety and training, but to develop this idea about what exactly is a safety culture. So what will we talk about tonight?
Well, safety culture is one of those things that I think a lot of people see it as a little bit abstract. But one of the ways you can think about it, you know when it's there, and you probably know just as well when it's not. But safety culture is something that should be the air that we breathe and in and out, and how we behave constantly. Everything that we do should be framed in terms of, is this the safe thing to do? Is this the right thing to do? And I think it gets back to that simple cliche, do the right thing regardless of who's looking or not.
Sure.
Do you always do the right thing? And that's what we want pilots to do always, all of us do, because our collective safety depends on it.
That's right. So the first article is from Rick Domingo and it's called Jump Seat, but the title of it is It Starts With You. So expand on that for us a little bit.
Well, that's exactly right. One of the things that Rick talks about here is that every part of the system depends on everybody else. This is part of the safety culture idea. And that in any complex system, we all depend on each other. And that each one of us owes it to everybody else to be the best that you can be. And that means starting with you. One of the analogies we use in here is, well, you know very well, especially now, the briefing that your flight attendants do on the oxygen.
Sure.
And I think we can all parrot it pretty well that you should put on your mask before helping others. And it may sound like that's a little bit selfish, but the whole idea is that if you don't take care of yourself, you have no hope of taking care of anybody or everybody else. And that is part of the safety culture idea too. You start with, you got to take care of yourself and your own training and skills and everything else.
And the other part that's alluded to in the jumpsuit article is all of the pieces and parts and everything that goes on behind the scenes to make the aviation system work.
Yep.
When I start out flying on the first flight of the day and we push back on time, I'm not even sure I can imagine everything that has happened behind the scenes to make sure that happens on time. Everything from the dispatchers making sure that everything is set up, the ground crew doing their job, the ground personnel getting the bags, not only the bags, but the right bags on the airplane, the flight planning with air traffic control system, and even something as simple as making sure the hotel picks up the crew and gets them to the airport on time.
That's really important for you guys. Yeah,
there are so many things that are happening behind the scenes to make it work. But as we'll talk about throughout this issue, when we talk about safety culture, there are opportunities to discuss this as a general aviation single pilot, in that you can adopt a safety culture of your own. It doesn't need to be a large organization to support it. You can support it yourself. So I'm anxious to talk about that. And even the part in the column that talks about fitness for duty. The GA equivalent of that, of course, is following perhaps the I'm safe,
right.
And some of the other ways to determine that we are fit for duty, whatever our mission is, whether it's to fly 30 miles in our single engine aircraft, or to take a longer cross-country flight. There has to be an evaluation of fitness for duty. In the airline world, when we had this in paper, we actually signed a piece of paper that says that we meet these requirements and that we're fit to operate this flight. And we have to do this for every flight. In the digital world that we're in right now, we can electronically sign that, but every flight we have to verify and attest to the fact that we're fit for duty. And that's the part of the culture.
And that's actually not a bad thing for GA to adapt and adopt. But yeah, there's a lot to it.
Well, let's take on the first article then.
Absolutely.
So this is about Culture Club, and there's many things implied in that. But one of the issues is that although it starts with you, you're not alone.
Well, that's exactly right. We're all in this together. We're all in the airspace together. This article is a bit of a reprise too of the FAA's compliance program, which is a foundational part of aviation safety culture as far as the agency is concerned. And this is where the focus is on finding the cause and taking effective actions to permanently solve the problem. And the compliance program really emphasizes all the things that really are a part of safety culture: communication, collaboration. Let's work together and figure out what the problem is and fix it before it causes an accident or incident. And oh, by the way, let's let other people know about it too, so that nobody else makes the same mistake.
Well, one of the things that it addresses is you can have an organized safety culture in in the Part 121 world. In fact, we refer to it as SMS, Safety Management System. But it doesn't mean that the general aviation pilot is excluded from that. And a couple of the strategies that general aviation pilots can use to adopt a safety culture is by adopting standard operating procedures for their own operation. And by standard operating procedures, most people think of those as something that's needed in a crew environment, but that's not at all the case. As general aviation pilots, we can all adopt our own standard operating procedures to fit our style of flying, to fit our aircraft, to fit our basic missions. And the purpose of them, of course, is so that we do, as you said, we do things the right way every time, no matter what, that we don't let familiarity and complacency be our enemy, actually. A friend of mine in Colorado has a T-tail Lance, and I sometimes will go out and do flight reviews for him. And it's his own airplane. He's the only operator of it. He's the only one that sees it. I'm amazed at how much detail he puts into pre-flighting his own airplane. It's as though you would think he was a renter unfamiliar with his airplane, but he treats it the same way every time, follows the same pattern. So he's developed a pre-flight procedure, as well as how he sets up his cockpit, that is very organized and detailed. Because if we have standard operating procedures, if something's not going quite right, we can still do the right thing. And maybe it's because we might be a bit fatigued. Perhaps there's a problem on the airplane that we have to deal with in flight. Perhaps there's a distraction due to weather or a passenger. But if we have these procedures ingrained in our way of doing things, then we'll do them the right way when things are not going quite perfectly. So it's a good lesson. And you mentioned the part about, mistakes and how the compliance program sort of addresses that. I wrote a presentation some years ago called "Never Ever Waste a Mistake."
Right.
Mistakes are, in the purest sense of the form, mistakes can be gifts that we can all learn from, or we can learn from ourselves. So I've made a point about telling people as much as I can that we should never waste a mistake. We should always learn from it, do better from it, and communicate it so that other people can learn from it.
Well, and that is a good segue into the next article, actually. The title of it is "Break Rules, See a Safety Issue." Well, this is about not wasting either a mistake that you made or a mistake that you see. I think most people, or I hope most people anyway, are familiar with what you call NASA forms. It's actually the aviation safety reporting system. It's called NASA forms because NASA is the third-party administrator to make sure that nobody is worried about the FAA seeing confidential forms. And this is absolutely confidential. But one of the things that I think, and this article does explain that filing an ASRS or NASA report will, it does have some benefits against the sanction from some event or deviation that's occurred. But I think one of the things that we'd really like to convey to people is that this is about don't waste a mistake. This is about using it to learn yourself, but using it for improving the system. I have filed several NASA reports over the years, not because I was afraid I was going to get hit by something, but there were I remember a couple of issues where I was flying and I saw something that struck me as being a problem, and so I reported it. And it's just about giving back to the system and making sure that everybody has the benefit of the information that you have to offer on safety. And
the database that's been amassed is huge.
Yep.
And
could be bigger,
of course. And we're in a data-driven world where we're trying to mitigate risk by analyzing some of the data that comes from a NASA report. In the Part 121 world, our equivalent is the ASAP program, Aviation Safety Action Program, and the principle is absolutely the same. A crew makes a mistake, thinks they made a mistake. It's a voluntary program, and in exchange for volunteering the information about what happened, you are then relieved from certificate action, unless, of course, it was, willful disregard for safety. But airlines and the entire industry sees great benefit from programs like this because it's information that's shared, it's accessible, and as you said, it's not just for, oh, I think I might have done something, I don't want to get in trouble. It is a mechanism for reporting perceived safety issues.
Right.
If we're taxiing around an airport and we see ridiculous taxiway signage that seems confusing, we can report that either through a NASA form or our ASAP report,
right.
and it'll be seen. And the more it's seen, then the more chances it'll have it being addressed. So both of those are excellent programs. We've been talking a little bit about, well, what about the single pilot? And
what about the single pilot? Right.
And
That's me.
the next article is the party of one.
Right.
So can you have a party?
Yeah. Of course you can. However, one of the things that this article really points out, there's a nice little definition, because people sometimes say, well, what is safety culture? Well, this one has a definition: beliefs, perceptions that employees have in relation to risks that they're operating with. But then that's okay, even if you mostly fly, as it says on the screen, if you mostly fly with a party of one, just you, as either as the only pilot on, or the only person on board, or the only pilot on board, you are part of the system. This kind of picks up on the point Rick Domingo's article makes as well. And you actually do have a huge system at your disposal. I think anybody who's ever declared an emergency or even a distress on the radio knows that immediately you have everybody's attention. But the whole idea is use the people around you, use people who know more than you do, use people who know more about a particular airplane that you do. Applying, these are ways that you can stay engaged, and I think it even says you're reading this article, reading this magazine is part of it. See it, say it, use every opportunity to train. But again, reach out, know what your resources are, and don't hesitate to use any of them.
Well, and even if you are ATC adverse, you have no desire to talk when you're flying, you fly out of a non-towered, uncontrolled airport in Class G airspace, you're not alone. Because somebody put fuel in the airplane, right? Somebody did maintenance inspections on the airplane, and it is not just one. And as you said, the system depends on every component and every person to make it safe. So as we talked about earlier, even though you might be a party of one, you can develop your own procedures. You can use them, but there are other people behind the scenes that are making your flight possible. So it's a good concept. And as we go into EAA and Oshkosh again, there are so many venues and so many opportunities to talk about how we're managing safety and mitigating risk at all levels of flying.
Absolutely.
Our next one deals a little bit about ATSB, and one of the things that occurred to me was, first of all, that this is a bit of a success story, which you can address, but the one thing that occurred to me was that the very technology that we can use in our airplane is part of our safety culture.
Well, that's exactly the point that I was hoping that you would draw from that,
Indeed.
Especially following what we talked about. The technology that we have nowadays is definitely part of the safety culture, just as transponders were when they first came in, the universal use of transponders. But in this case, you've got your own transponder right there. You can see a lot of what air traffic control sees. And this, I having flown with ADS-B for a while, and my flying club equipped with ADS-B-in, or at least a solution that includes ADS-B-in, and I personally don't want to fly without it. But one of these, this article talks about a study and a safety analysis that showed the significant reduction in the risk that is out there for aircraft that are equipped with ADS-B, because I know when you fly in congested airspace, it may look when you're looking out there like nothing else is out there, because it can be really hard to see other airplanes. But when you see on your traffic display how many other little dots are out there, Well,
last night when I was
yeah.
coming into O'Hare, I thought I was in a dogfight. I mean, there were so many things on our traffic display.
I thought that's what O'Hare was all about.
It seems to be. Yeah,
okay.
It seems to be. But this is an article that really describes a success story.
It does.
About how technology has helped, and it like so many other things that have come before it, as you mentioned, transponders. I certainly remember the first Loran and thinking that was the greatest thing ever. And of course now it's, been replaced by GPS and other technology. But even as we've talked about in previous editions, angle of attack indicators, so many things that are helping to keep us safe.
Well, and evolution is a great, the whole evolution is a great segue, thank you for that, into our next piece.
And I don't know, I know our viewers can't see this completely, but in the back of the room is a bookcase with some of my selected books. And one of them, of course, is The Origin of Species by Charles Darwin. So when I saw this article, I thought, I wonder where this is going.
Well, this was fun. Before I read this one when I was editing, this was written by one of our staff members. I confess, I'd never heard of Lamarck before. I had no idea who that was. And I was like, huh, what is this? Well, it turns out that he had a theory of evolution. And the point that my colleague makes in this article is that Lamarck's theory of evolution, while it doesn't explain the origin or development of the species, that it's pretty darn good in explaining the evolution of things like safety culture and human behavior, how humans learn and evolve and develop. And the 4 points, or 4 of the big points out here, are things that you can do like community structure, codes of conduct, there are lots of those. And any theory, change is good, especially if it's, well, change is good in the right direction. And that should be up and better. Well, and the other thing I'd like to add to that, or at least elaborate on, is codes of conduct. I mean, you mentioned that there are a lot of them, but there's 2 that I'm quite familiar with. One is was written by a pilot association that is a code of ethics. The other is from NAFI, the National Association of Flight Instructors. And they're just, sometimes it's good to go back and read through those as a way to kind of reset your thinking about the right way to do things. When I think about training, so much of our training is based on sort of higher level concepts. However, none of that would be successful unless we go back to the basics sometimes. Absolutely. I mean, it's why we do recurrent training. It's why we have flight reviews. It's to kind of go back to the basics, do things that we haven't had a chance to do in a while, and to, knock some rust off and to improve. But the code of conduct or code of ethics that many organizations put out, to me, are just a wonderful way to frame safety culture, and it can just serve as reminders of what our mission is, to be safe. Absolutely. Well, and codes of conduct, I want to mention too, when another set of codes out there, they actually call it a family, and it's mentioned in this article, the Aviators Code Initiative. If you Google that, you'll come up with, there are now Aviators codes of conduct for instructors, private, and for various levels, including remote pilots. And I think they're constantly expanding, and the idea is to try to take best of the best practices and best safety practices and cultures for different categories and classes, and to put it out there for people to use, and as much as anything, just to give you something to think about, and as you said, to reset your expectations and your expectations for yourself more than anything else. That's right. That's right. Jason Blair has contributed a nice article about other pilots looking out for you. Yes. And it's a well stated article about how can other pilots reach out and help their colleagues or pass on advice in the right way without being critical, but to maybe present information in a way that will have people see things in a different way, or to at least take a pause. So I thought this was a really nice article about how to intervene a little bit. Well, it's that, but it's the other piece of it is also about how to accept an intervention by another pilot. I think they say in some of the various like 10-step or 12-step programs, the first thing you have to do is acknowledge that you have a problem. That if other pilots are saying things to you like, gosh, did you look at the windsock? Or boy, it's really windy out there today. Or, did you look at those clouds? People, one of the points that Jason really makes in this piece is that you may be getting information that is very subtle, but you really pay attention, because if other pilots are making comments to you about, wow, you really want to go fly in this, maybe you need to rethink it.
Well, and it goes the other direction too. As a flight instructor for a number of years, I've learned that my students might be communicating something to me about their own level of comfort, that as instructors we need to be listening to and to be paying attention, to catch the hints that may not be obvious, but they're subtle, but they're very important. I mean, if a student says to me, hey, do you want to do this takeoff? I'm okay if you do it. I'm thinking maybe he's telling me maybe he's not comfortable doing it because of the conditions or something.
Right.
And certainly in an instructing environment, there's a lot of give and take of information. But just in the friend and colleague environment, there should be some, give and take of information. And what Jason goes on to explain is, in addition to, discussing whatever the situation is that's got somebody's attention, we should be offering up ways to mitigate the risk. One of the benefits of being a general aviation pilot is that we don't necessarily have to go when it's time to go. And mitigating risk can be, suggesting things about, managing time, managing weather. One thing that I've noticed too is that just because you can hit the direct button on your GPS doesn't mean you have to go direct.
Or that you should.
Right. You could go out of the way a little bit to avoid some weather. And giving people the freedom to have those kinds of conversations in a non-threatening way, I think, is another way of the community helping to build a safety culture.
Absolutely. And another one of the takeaways that I hope people will get from this article is, so first of all, listen if you start hearing things that suggest that other pilots may be questioning your sanity or your decision, but really don't take it in a pejorative, and don't get defensive about it. Really accept the fact that we're all looking out for each other, and if somebody else cares enough to be looking out for you, well, take it that way.
Yeah, for sure.
Accept it that way.
For sure. It's about being open to learning. And as I open up today, I'm every flight right now feels like I'm a newbie. Well, even though as an instructor, I know our procedures and profiles and call outs and checklist responses and all of our emergency procedures quite well. Operationally, there's things I just haven't seen or done in quite some time. Sometimes the hardest part is, now that you've landed at the airport, where do we park? So where do we park? So sometimes you just need that kind of help too. So.
Well, and there's plenty of help in the community, which is the subject of our next article.
Engaging the aviation community.
Absolutely.
So it's really about the purpose of the FAST team. And absolutely. I'll just borrow a quote out of the magazine here. The mission statement: improve the nation's aviation accident rate by conveying safety principles and practices through training, outreach, and education, while establishing partnerships and encouraging the continual growth of a positive safety culture within the aviation community. It sums up everything we've been talking about: training, communicating, engaging.
And working with the community. And this article talks about some things you probably know about, other things maybe you don't, but we've got the Wings and AMT programs. Again, you can get Wings and AMT credit for this course. Seminars and webinars, which is, again, something we're doing right here. Safety.gov, lots of online resources there. We really want to point out too, social media. A lot of people now get a lot of information from social media. And
your colleague,
absolutely,
Paul Cianciola,
yep.
does a marvelous job at social media for the FAA.
Facebook, Twitter. We now have a group, a safety group, a GA safety group on Facebook that is just about promoting these kinds of things. There's local expertise, and then I really like this one at the end too, hangar flying. Who doesn't like hangar flying?
Everybody likes it.
Everybody likes hangar flying, and hangar flying it's not only fun, but this is how pilots can build that sense of community, but truly learn from each other, don't waste a mistake, but also learn from the things that other people who've gone before you have figured out, and learn how to do it right, follow best practices, imitate best practices, and so on. The other piece about hangar flying, several months ago, I read a book about how human beings are wired for stories. What is hangar flying except there I was
on a dark and stormy night.
On a dark and stormy night, and there's so many stories that most of us could tell with relish.
For sure. And the other thing too about seminars and webinars is that I would encourage people to consider that you don't always have to be the one listening. You could be the one giving.
Yep.
All of us have had some experiences that are worth sharing and worth learning from. And jumping in and coming up with a seminar at your local airport, at a high school, or any place, even if you feel like you might be a little afraid of public speaking, you're the one that owns the story.
Absolutely.
Therefore, it's a lot easier to communicate. People ask me all the time if I mind, doing public speaking, and I always say no, as long as I know what I'm talking about. If I don't, it's a little bit difficult. But if you own the story, you can be on the giving end as well as the receiving end, which I think is a wonderful opportunity to just do more outreach.
Absolutely.
You know these next two people in our FAA Faces column. I know you recently moved to Arizona, and
I did.
These colleagues are part of that system.
Yeah, Tina and Ernie are both the denizens of my new hometown in the Phoenix area. And by the way, Madison may have cooler temperatures right now technically, but you guys have evil humidity right now.
And bugs.
Yeah, well, Phoenix, I would point out, it's like 11% humidity right now. Thank you very much. So anyway, yeah, Tina and Ernie are, I know them both quite well, and we wanted to highlight them because I think one of the concepts that they have pioneered in their area, I hope others will follow it too. These guys act as a team. Tina's ops and Ernie's airworthiness, but they do seminars together, and they act and work together in so many ways simply because they want to make the point that we are all in this together. Because you're a mechanic or because you're a pilot, you're still in the system, and we depend on each other. We all know that pilots depend on mechanics, and mechanics need, we pilots provide lots of work for mechanics to do.
Indeed, yeah, indeed.
So anyway, this is a little bit about their background, and they're fabulous. They're very active in the Scottsdale FSDO, their whole area of operation, and I've told them that now that I'm out there, if they can use me to do seminars in the future, I'm happy to try to join the team.
Well, and again, the idea of partnership to communicate on both sides of operations and maintenance is an important concept because they do go hand in hand, of course.
Yep.
So maybe you'll have a chance to see them more often.
Yeah, I have a chance to do all sorts of things. So.
Yeah. Drones is another part of our aviation world. There's probably been no other segment of aviation that has developed so quickly.
Absolutely.
And requires a lot of thought concerning regulation and safety. And of course, there's embedded in all of this discussion is there an opportunity for safety culture among the drone community? And the answer, of course, is
yes. This article is about the fact that so there are two sides to certainly every story, and certainly to this one. That one of the things that traditional pilots need to do and understand is that remote pilots are pilots, and that we need to be welcoming and to really enthusiastically welcome this new segment into the community, because anything that expands aviation is good for us all.
Mhm.
And we need to reach out to our partners and our colleagues now, fellow pilots in the remote pilot community, and try to help them understand how some of the things that we take for granted work. And the article talks a lot about how some of the things that the FAA in particular is doing, partnering with major organizations and going out and doing these seminars and really engaging with the community to try to help integrate, to help with the integration on both sides, really, the manned pilots and remote pilots, and make sure that we are all working and playing well together and safely.
Well, when you think of the uses of drones, they're often there's often overpopulated areas. Our local news station here in Madison has, I think they call it Sky Drone, which they use to cover certain events. So when you think about drone, it's not just one person who might have it out in the field doing it by himself. The applications are widespread, and an important part of certainly an important part of the industry and the community. However, there are safety issues that we need to address and need to develop and need to manage.
And just again, to understand that we are a large community, and this is a new segment of our community, and there will be other new segments of our community that we can't even imagine yet.
Sure.
But we need to be welcoming and to bring everybody into the idea that we are all in this together. We are a safety community.
We've been talking a lot about safety culture, and we've also been talking about how we are able to use data from a variety of programs. I mentioned the ASAP program. You mentioned the NASA and the ASRS program. There are other voluntary safety programs that are, part of this. There's just sometimes the sharing of information. But then, now that you have data, we have to do something with it. And that gets into the next issue about how do we actually measure safety culture. And sometimes I think organizations are rich in data but poor on information. And your colleague Tom Hoffman addresses this a little bit.
Yeah, this is, they're actually researchers. Researchers will study all sorts of things that you never imagined were even studyable, if that's a word.
It is now.
It is now. Thank you. But yeah, there's a team of researchers that has developed a study to try to look at what is a safety culture, and they've got teams and sub-teams, and I'll let you read the article to figure out how it's going. But one of the things that at the end, where they talk about the question going forward, is how to find people who don't have a safety culture and encourage them to join the fold. I mean, I think this has been the age-old question in a lot of ways. You have people who believe, and they come to events and seminars, and how do you reach the unreachable? And this study is aimed at trying to define what is and isn't, and how better ways that we can do that.
And implied in this too a little bit is in compliance, I would say. We all are looking for ways to do things correct. I mean, that's what safety culture is all about, is building a culture where you're going to, as we've said, do the right thing every time, all the time, no matter what. But sometimes we slip, and sometimes there's intentional versus, non-intentional compliance issues. And finding a way to capture data is just another way of helping us understand how do we get everything into this one package.
That's right.
And it's not an easy task, but collecting the data and not being able to move forward and do something with it would be a shame. So I'm glad to see that out of all the data that's being collected, there's people who can devote their time and effort to help move things forward and move initiatives forward.
And figure out what it means. Yeah.
Yeah, important. Our issue on vertical speaking, devoted to helicopters, is information that I guess I didn't know that much about. I mean, I know what an AD is because I read about them on our own aircraft frequently, And I know what an NPRM is, Notice of Proposed Rulemaking. What I didn't understand until I read this article, vertically speaking, is they're interrelationships. So could you
Sure.
frame that discussion a little bit?
Airworthiness directives are actually part of a rulemaking process, which is pretty complicated. It is a legal document. There are particular processes that have to be followed. So the point that this article is making is that the FAA publishes proposed airworthiness directives as notices of proposed rulemaking. And it stresses that we want to hear from people, especially at that stage, because while it's a notice of proposed rulemaking, it's much, much easier to bring in other issues and to make changes if necessary than after the final rule has taken effect, because it has maybe a higher threshold to get changes. So if you're looking to have something changed or to have some influence, the stress point here is that the notice of proposed rulemaking is the stage to do it, because that's the way that the entire rulemaking structure is set up, is to get public comment. And by the way, if your comments are made through a public docket and a notice of proposed rulemaking, just as it's proposed, as it's shown here, then what's going to happen is that comment will have to be dispositioned. It will be taken into account and specifically accounted for in the way that the final rule is developed.
And where do we find these things?
Well, the notices of proposed rulemaking are in the Federal Register. I think there are some links in the article, but if you just Google Federal Register, I actually know people, particularly in some of the advocacy associations, who I think I'm sort of amazed that they stay up until strange hours of the night to see the first copy of the next day's Federal Register. I'm not one of those, but I'm glad there are people who do.
But the point is, if there's an issue affecting your aircraft, your operation, something significant to your particular realm of aviation, it's better to make a comment at the NPRM stage.
Absolutely. Yes. You'll have a better chance of having influence in there.
Okay. Our maintenance section, nuts, bolts, and electrons. This time, it addresses really the collection of data, but also the reporting mechanism to get the data. This article talks about SDRs, and which are service difficulty reports, and also talks about the reporting system, and it covers everything from suspecting unapproved parts to anything that's service related that the maintenance personnel feels like needs to be reported and dealt with. And again, it's another way of establishing a database and an essential part of the safety culture.
It is. And it's about, if you see something, say something. Don't just throw up your hands and complain about it. Try to share the information that you have, because information that you have in one place, and if you share it through the appropriate channels, it allows the people who are in a position to do something about it to say, hey, wait a minute, we're seeing that in different places. We need to look systematically at this. It's not just a one-off thing.
Sure.
So
sure. So the next article is yours.
It is.
It's under the column of checklist. And I sense by the way you wrote it that you had a little bit of fun doing it.
I did.
Okay.
I did. I always try to have fun when I write, but sometimes it's easier than other times. No, so there's a reason they call that blinking thing on the screen the cursor.
I'm sure.
There are times when I'm really trying to figure out how I want to approach a topic or what to do, and staring at a blank screen. Well, I also tend to do Google searches and things like that. And I came across, of all things, an agricultural, a brochure that the FAST team developed for agricultural operators. And as I write in this article, I was ready to just move on because, hey, how could that possibly be helpful? And I discovered that actually it is. And I hope you'll read the article to find out how. But what I ended up doing to summarize it was I drew an analogy here between farmers, which is funny for me to do because I don't like dirt.
Yeah.
We know that.
But you are in farm country here.
I know that. Yeah. But between farming and and safety culture. And it's the things that you see here. Pick what you plant, weed it and water it. It's easier to weed things, weed out bad habits,
When
or
they're
weed
small.
out weeds when they're
Yeah,
small.
yeah.
And you have to water it, because knowledge and training will wither if you don't give them fresh infusions, just like plants will wither.
Mhm.
Measure to manage, and I quoted you because you taught me the knee-high, what is it,
Knee-high,
with the
4th of July, about the whole corn thing.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah,
so
that wasn't original. That's well known, actually.
I know, but you taught me, I didn't know. So how do you measure what you're doing? Because if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, is the way the saying goes. And then finally, share the wealth. I use a very personal analogy here. My dad grew tomatoes. He grew wonderful tomatoes, actually. And I had to weed them and water them when I was a kid. And the last piece was about sharing the wealth, that we need, just as my dad shared his crops wherever he could, we need to share our knowledge and experience and contribute. That's really part of safety promotion, which is a huge part of safety culture. So when I drafted this article, I had done a background of a tomato plant, but I took it out because it was too hard to read the article. I wanted you to read the words.
Well, they're good words.
Okay.
They're good words. And part of it, too, is the idea about your comment about it's easier to fix habits when they're small habits and they don't become ingrained in your, we don't want bad habits to become ingrained in your own safety or standard operating procedures. And some of the ways of mitigating that is by sharing information, going back to what we talked about how other pilots can help other pilots.
Exactly.
And discussing sometimes we have to do a Control-Alt-Delete on ourselves to kind of start fresh and say, okay, I've not been doing this the way I would like to do it. I'm going to start over. Yep. So I get the habit thing. And it's easy to develop habits that were not how we were taught, but it's also easy to undo that.
And it's easier to undo it at the earliest stage than later on. Sure.
Our two medical topics, condition inspection. The first one deals with, of course, a very serious but also treatable situation of melanoma, which is an aggressive form of skin cancer. And it's a pertinent topic for pilots to pay attention to, regardless of what you're flying and how you're flying. We need to manage that and be careful because it is one of the more aggressive skin cancers there, certainly treatable through surgery and sometimes other follow-up treatment. The article lists the key signs and indicators that we should be aware of in terms of the color of a spot or a lesion, the shape of it, whether it's evolved in a fairly short amount of time, if it's asymmetrical, if there's been changes to it. And those are all important things to pay attention to. But the main part of this is as in so many other things, early detection is a better way to manage it.
And prevention is better still. And that's something we really thought that this was an appropriate thing to include at this time of the year, because this is summer. This is when people are going to be out in the sun, and those of us who are going to Oshkosh are going to be out in the sun a lot. Now that I'm in Arizona, I'm very conscious of sun protection in ways that I wasn't before. So these are just things that, whether pilots or no pilot, whether you're a pilot or whether you're not a pilot, these are things that you need to be aware of, and you can do a lot to prevent it in the first place. And
perhaps it's no surprise, but in the airline world and in the business aviation world, where pilots are flying higher altitude aircraft, it is a concern because of the long-term exposure to UV effects. Yep. So it's a good article, and as you said, it's a timely one. And the next article, part of the air medical information, is about getting drugs approved and taking medication. And Dr. Berry makes several good points. One is that just because a medication might be approved doesn't mean you can operate an aircraft while you're taking it. So you need to speak with an AME about that to make sure. And then the other question is, how do drugs get on the approved FAA list. And can you?
They tend to use
Yes.
the term accepted because it's the FDA that actually approves the medication. The FAA accepts it for aviation purposes.
Mhm.
And that process doesn't even start until a year after it's been on the market, because no matter how many research studies there have been done, things crop up usually when it gets into the broader market into use.
Sure.
There's also the whole idea that you need to look at how it might behave at higher altitudes and in some of the, well, in the flying environment. So I learned a few things from this article, and I hope you will too.
Have a look. It's got good information. The next one is post-flight, and as we have discussed before, we usually start this issue out with the jump seat column, and it typically ends with the post-flight. And the post-flight is your article about doing a little bit of rebalancing. So,
well, yes.
What did you do?
Well, I moved.
That would unbalance me, actually, if I had to move.
It did me for a while too. No, for a variety of reasons, I came to a point where, as I say in the article, sometimes the universe speaks loudly, and it has to speak more loudly if you aren't paying attention. But the universe does have a way of getting your attention. It got mine. I realized that there were some changes that I needed to make in life, the universe, and everything. So that's what I did, and that's had some mostly positive effects. But I write there very honestly about. It's been a wrenching thing to leave my flying club, and to be looking to something else that I don't know quite what it is yet. But I know that the move that I made was a healthier thing, and this piece kind of matches up with what Rick Domingo wrote in the front. You've got to take care of yourself, and we talk about our culture is very much more, better, higher, faster. And we need to kind of figure out when is enough. I don't think we have a good sense of that. So I ended the piece with a quote from a new pop music song where the title of it is Me, but it says, "You're the only one of you, so take good care of you."
It's good advice, right?
It is good advice, and I've decided that I'm giving myself a year before I take on any new extracurricular activities. So you can hold me to that.
Well, and like you, I did a little bit of rebalancing myself recently as we started out this broadcast. I've been training and teaching for the past about 19 and a half years, and just recently made the decision to go back and fly the line as a line pilot. And it comes with some pluses and minuses that causes me to, just evaluate what's important and
what sparks joy.
Yeah. But when I met you at the airport last night, I remember you said, how'd your day go? And I said, well, it's up and down. So,
literally.
As a normal pilot they should be, right? So
the downs should manage the ups, I think is the way it's supposed to go.
I think so, yeah. The news article is ATIS. It's just a summary of contemporary news that's happening right now. There's several things in here that caught my attention. One was that the HIWAS broadcasts are going away after so much time, but it's certainly because of the distribution of weather information and the accessibility.
The evolution.
Yes, and the accessibility through ADS-B, for example, and other things is so much better. Tell us what's going on with the ADS-B rebates.
So I was going to point out that blurb. ADS-B rebates are gone, but this little blurb describes the fact that if somebody has claimed a rebate and was unable to use it, the FAA has a process for essentially collecting them and redistributing them. So if you missed out or you think you missed out, there still might be an opportunity. So don't hesitate. Keep a lookout for that. And now moving on, the next one's exciting.
It is. It's the National General Aviation Award honorees. First, tell us about the program.
Well, every year, the FAA and the industry, this is an industry committee, get together and look at candidates for Flight Instructor of the Year,
Mechanics.
Aviation maintenance
Mhm.
technician of the year, or aviation technician, I think is the official title. And then FAA Safety Team Representative of the Year. I believe there's a wings program that they recently did, so you can look for that.
Mhm.
And if you're going to Oshkosh, you'll have an opportunity to meet them and hopefully to attend the awards ceremony, the official awards ceremony.
Yeah, it's exciting, and congratulations to these individuals. The Aviation Technician of the Year is John David Monty, who makes his home in Nevada. National Certificated Flight Instructor of the Year is Gary Dale Reeves of Decatur, Texas. And I'm proud to recognize Karen Ann Kalashek. Karen and I are colleagues and friends. I work with her on the NAFI Board of Directors. Karen is really involved in promoting aviation safety in so many aspects. So congratulations to all three of you, and it's an honor to see that you get these awards. And as you said, we'll have a chance to meet the people when we go to Oshkosh. So some of our wrap up. If we want to tell people where to find FAA Safety Briefing, this is the standard list. What are some of the mechanisms?
Free download, mobile-friendly formats, email notifications. You can see it here, and of course you can follow us on social media. See a lot of our articles start to appear in Adobe Spark format. We're intending for everything to be mobile-friendly because that's how we all live.
And the old-fashioned way is in print, of course.
Yeah, right.
And
you can subscribe.
It's often featured in airports and FBOs, at FAA safety seminars, so you can
plenty of copies at the Safety Center.
Yep. Our next slide is looks like a memorial of past issues.
Well, I have fun doing this one every month because it actually reminds me a little bit. Our issues, the page that we just showed you, there was an archive, so we aim for our issues to be what one of my colleagues calls shelf stable. We're looking for topics and focus that are going to be relevant for a while, and hopefully you can use them as references. So go back if you're looking for a topic or a focus. Chances are pretty good we've covered things somehow. It's
a great reference material, and I often go back on the web and click through the issues to see something that I may have missed. So good. There's always mechanisms to provide feedback.
Yes,
I know that you're anxious to have feedback from the user group, and how will somebody do that?
Well, we have a Flight Forum. That's where we publicly answer questions, but you can also give us feedback. You can use the QR code to come straight to our mailbox, which is shown there, safetybriefing@faa.gov. And you can engage with us on Twitter and Facebook. We do have our own Twitter stream, and we do respond. We follow that and monitor that really closely.
Very good. Well, it about wraps up this issue, but the next issue, of course, I'm always intrigued by the design people at your magazine. The September and October issue. What's up with the lights?
So I put that on there because I thought that was fun. The theme, the topic for September, October is handling emergencies, which includes preventing them wherever possible, because that's the best way to handle one of all. But I also want to give you a little bit of a teaser. We are freshening the design and the format of the magazine, so September, October should be the debut for that. We're going to be previewing a little bit of it at Oshkosh. We've got a mock-up of the new cover. So next time you see Safety Briefing Live, we'll be spiffed up with a new format too.
We'll look forward to it. I'm happy with the current issue, but I'll look forward to the evolution.
Everything needs to evolve.
That's right. Once again, folks, to get wings or AMT credit, we have a slide with links to how to get your wings or AMT credit. And a reminder that to get through those questions, you'll need a print copy.
Ideally, yes, and certainly we hope that we've given you, just like I said earlier, enough of an incentive and a teaser that you might want to go and look at some of them more carefully and closely than we're able to do in just an hour.
Okay. Well, we'll see everybody in September, and
look forward to it.
Thanks so much for being part of the program, and be safe.
Have a good evening.